car that I have with me today is easily one of the most important launches of this year, and the reason I say this is simple. India is a small car country with 70% of the sales coming from hatchbacks. In fact, the smaller it gets, the more it sells. The dinky car segment, that's what I call it, and this is dominated by two players, Maruti with their Alto and Hyundai with the Ion. But now it's the ambitious French who have walked into the Japanese and the Korean territory with this car, the Renault Kwid. The Kwid is truly an India-made car built on the express orders of the chairman of the Renault-Nissan Alliance, Carlos Ghosn, who wanted a small car built for a country like India. But the brief was to keep the cost down, or in other words, make it affordable. The other part of the brief was to make this car, unlike the small cars sold here, spacious and good-looking. And looking at the end result, I have to admit that the brief was executed quite well. The Kwid here sits on a brand new platform. Internally, Renault calls it the CFM platform or the Common Family Module platform. Another word, A, was added to it to denote that it's also an affordable platform. A here stands for affordability. Renault, in fact, conceived of this car for the Indian market. They designed the car, they made the car in India, sitting in Chennai, and spent 4 years doing that. In fact, 98% of the components are sourced from India. So in this sense, the Kwid is a totally Indian car produced for the Indian market, and this is the first market the Kwid will be driven in. Here the car is up for a big test because the Indian market is certainly not one of the easiest markets for the product to prove itself, and the Kwid is now up in the Indian market against rivals which are very well established. So the task for the Kwid is quite cut out. Renault will, as is the practice within the group, share the platform with its alliance partner Nissan at a later stage. But the platform has been created keeping in mind the flexibility of building different body styles on it. So at a later stage, the cars you will get on this platform will be a variety of sedans, hatchbacks and compact SUVs. The Kwid here is a small car, but the good part is you actually have to be told to believe this, because one look at it and you get the impression that she is much bigger than what she really is. She measures in at just a little over 3.6 meters, but there is no way you are going to say that she will fit into the dinky car segment. In fact, Renault is attempting here to give the customers everything they might have thought of or dreamt of in a small car, like space, good looks, performance, and the biggest thing, affordability. The Kwid is supposed to be priced along with this little dinky cars, but what she will give you is more space, more power, and of course more style. That's what the Kwid is all about. The designers of this car have obviously been inspired by the success of the Duster, as they gave the Kwid a high SUV-like stance and a high ground clearance. Both these things the existing cars in this segment cannot boast of, and this should give the Kwid an edge. The apprehension most people have while looking at buying a small car is whether the car will have enough space or if she will offer you any features at all. The Kwid here, I think, has solved these two problems very effectively. Once you are inside the car, you realize that the space has been very well used indeed. And this has generated in this car plenty of space. You have enough leg room, you have enough shoulder room, enough headroom here, and that's true for the rear seat as well. And in terms of features, she does offer you plenty, especially if you buy the top end here. So both these problems have been really solved, and here there is a bit of clever designing used as well, which has resulted in something like this, almost 3 glove boxes, and that's really nice because you can keep most of the stuff here very neatly, and you have bottle holders on the door pocket plus plenty of cubby holes to keep your knick-knack in. So the uses of space in this Kwid here is really clever and very practical. In fact, even the seat, if you look at it, comes with a bit of bolstering, something that you will not expect really in a car in this segment. But then this is what pleases you really in the Kwid. Overall, if space is what is the first essential for a small car, then the Kwid will immediately impress with what she offers. She has ample boot space of 300 litres and the foldable rear seats add to it to make it over 1100 litres, and that's really amazing for a car this size. Quid here packs in quite a few features which you really don't expect to find in cars in this segment, like a nice display here, but this is available only on the top trim. When you look at the instrumentation here, what you see is something very basic. A nice digital readout of the speed, which is large and visible and quite easy to read, but at the same time you do not get a tachometer. The Quid here has obviously been built to a cost, and it shows in many ways, especially in the materials that they have used, on the doors not closing with that solid third but instead a tinny sound, and then in little instances like the lack of a tachometer. The top end might boast of features like a complete infotainment system with a sat-nav and a stereo, power windows for the front and central locking, but at the same time it lacks some very basic features like internal adjustments for outside rear view mirrors, which in the long run might be an irritant for the users, as you have to literally stick your hand out of the window to adjust these, or better quality material for the switchgear, or even the single stock wiper reminds you that cost has been an important factor in building this car. The motor that powers the Quid is made in Chennai here, and it was developed for this car here, keeping in mind the requirements of a small car. So what you really get here is an engine which is not going to give you flat out power delivery. Instead, it's going to focus on fuel economy, and that's exactly what the Quid does. According to ARI certification, what you get is over 25 kilometers to a liter. For a small car like this, that's a lot. And the company claims that it is this fuel efficiency of over 25 kilometers to a liter is what makes this Quid the most fuel efficient petrol car in the country. It's a 0.8 liter 3-cylinder aluminum block petrol engine which gives out 54 PS as peak power. And the moment you start driving this car, you realize that this is certainly not the most refined engine that you have driven. It sounds a bit harsh, the power delivery isn't really linear, and in fact you have to work the gearbox quite a bit to get the juice out of it. This is where the competition will definitely have an edge over this Quid. We feel better insulation and use of damping material would have brought down the decibel levels inside the cabin, but then keep in mind that this is a city car meant for your regular chores. The 0.8 liter engine initially might sound very sufficient for a car that just weighs in at 660 kgs, and it gives you a very nice healthy power to weight ratio of over 85. But then when you start driving the car, you soon realize that this is not the whole story. In fact, the response from the engine is very lazy. You blip the throttle and you don't find much happening. In fact, you really have to work the gearbox to get the full juice out of it, and that will take some doing, especially if you are stuck in city traffic. And the engine here is mated to a gearbox which is 5-speed and again locally produced here. And I must say the gearbox does the job quite well. Short throws, slots in perfectly, no major complaints there with the gearbox. At this point of time, the company isn't offering an automatic option, so the only option you have got is to keep on working the gearbox. But the electric power steering here, which makes a very light job of helping you get out of the city traffic, becomes really vague and floaty once you hit the highway, and you get virtually no feedback. It's something that takes the driving pleasure away. But I like the ride and handling of the car. It's quite sorted out, it's planted, it does the job quite well, and what will really come in handy in Indian conditions is the SUV-like ground clearance, and this is something which will help you take the Quid pretty much everywhere, and in fact into the SUV territory, and that's something really nice. So if you do get to own this Quid, what you will manage to do is save a lot of money which otherwise would have gone to the oil companies. So overall, if economy is what's on top of your mind here, then this should be the car for you. In terms of active safety, you do not get ABS or EBD or any other feature, but you get a driver's side airbag as an option on the top trim. It does baffle me a bit as to why this option is not available for the base or the mid trim as well. The Kwid is one car which has really taken me by surprise, and a very pleasant one at that. The reason being that she's a small car, but she's really big on space. So if you are someone who never looked at buying a small car because of the constraint of space, will do very well now to have a look at this Kwid. Because I think with the launch of this Kwid here, the space problem in the small car will be solved forever. I think the Kwid will redefine the dynamics of this dinky car segment in India. Okay, the car does have its downsides, it's built to a cost and it shows in some places. The engine could have been punchier, but then these are really small flaws if you look at the overall package. And the grapevine here tells me that this is going to be very competitively priced as well. So overall, I think the package should really work. If Renault does manage to price the car between the rupees 3 to 4 lakh bracket, which they have promised, then the Kwid will certainly be the car to reckon with in this segment. Because other than the price, she has surely upped the benchmark in every other way, be it space, looks or even fuel efficiency. Renault, to add to this, will offer you a 2-year 50,000 kilometer warranty as well to make the big small car even more attractive.